Hey there, today we are going to implement Redux library in a Flutter application. Redux is a very popular state management library in JavaScript world. I personally use Redux when I developed React based web application. So some people converted the JavaScript library in the Dart programming language so that we can use Redux library to manage state in our Flutter application. If you ever use Redux, if you ever develop web application maybe using React, maybe you know Redux, then it is very easy to understand how Redux works in Flutter application. But here I want to give you a short brief. Redux has three principles. The first principle is single source of truth. That means the state of your whole application will be stored in an object tree within a single store. The second principle is state is read only. That means if your application need to change the state, it should dispatch an action, and the action is basically an object. If you want, you can also pass some data, and this action when you pass the store, it basically goes through the reducer function. Reducer basically a pure function that will take this action, create a new state with the modified state object and return that state. So basically based on this principle, Redux works. Now dive into our tutorial to see how we integrate Redux in our Flutter application. So stay tuned and keep learning.
So this is a simple application where there is two screen, home and about, and there is a setting page. So in the setting page we can change the font size. We can also set that if the text will be bold or italic or not, and if there is a setting changed here, we want to apply that settings in our app's other screen, that means in the home screen and the about screen. So today we will use Redux and Flutter Redux to implement this functionality. We will create the app state. You will see this code in my github.com/mahmudhasan/thingdev, and then there you will see Flutter, and then come to the small demo, and here you will see the states by Redux or state_redux. So there is two directory. One is states_redux starter, where this application code is there. That is a blank thing, nothing will be happen in the states. And there is another directory that is states_redux_finish. That is that contains the full final code. So if you want to write code with me, just download this State Redux starter and open in your Android Studio. So here you see the code in my Android Studio. So at first we need to include the Redux and Flutter Redux library. So to do that, let's see the pub.dev. Here you will see that how to install Redux library. So just copy this Redux thing and go to your Android Studio and paste it here. Flutter_redux, and just go to the installing, and here also copy this Flutter_redux dependencies code. And now just save this file and click package get. At first we want to create our app state. Okay, so to do that, I want to separate my code. So in the lib directory, I want to create another folder, and the directory of the this folder name will be model, and in the model we want to write code. So here I want to create a Dart file, and that file name will be app state_state.drt. And now I want to create our model code here. So this state will be the app state, so that any screen can access this state. So at first let's import our package material, this library, and now I want to define a class. In an application there may be many states, but for a global state or main state, or you can say this as an app state, in that case it's better to use the name app state. So what we want that our app state contains three things. One is the slider, that means the slider font size. So let's define a property here, double slider font size, and then we want there should be a bold and italic, right? So this should be a boolean variable. So to do that, I will define bool bold and then bool italic. Simple, only three property in this app state. Now let's define the default constructor. So app state, and here what we want that I want to pass the slider font size, and I want to define two default value for bold and italic. So, and I also want that this slider value, this font size is a required field. So to do that, I want to type required. Now I want to define a name constructor. In this name constructor, I want to pass another instance of the app state class. So let's define this another instance, and here what I want to do, slider dot font size equals another dot slider font size, and I also want to define a getter for font size. So the slider font size contains the actual value. So when I change this thing, you will see that in the run section, it's the value basically comes from 0.0 to 1.0, this slider value, right? But the actual font size will be like 15 to 30. So that's why I need to define a getter function, double get. So if I do that, I will get this this value from this app state. So our app state is done. Now we want to create the Redux directory where we will implement the Redux code. So let's create another directory, package directory name will be Redux, and here I want to first define a action. So I have to create a file, a Dart file, and the file name will be actions. So basically actions are very simple thing. Action is, you can think these are nouns. So for example, it may be a simple thing, so you can use the enum type if you want, or you can use a class to create action name. So in this section, or in this action.dart file, I want to define name as a class because I also want to pass some data. So to do that, let's define our first action name. This is the action name. So we will use the class name as the action name. We will also want to pass some data. So to do that, in this class, I want to define a variable double payload. So you can give any name to here, like data or font size, whatever you want. But when I use Redux in with React in web application development, most of the time we are using this payload as a container or data name. So that's why I want to use this payload term in here as well, and I want to pass in the default constructor this dot payload. Now define other two action, bold and italic. So our three actions are defined. Now come to the reducer section. So to do that, I want to create a file in Redux directory, another Dart file, and the file name will be reducers. So here in the reducers, we want to define a function. So here in the reducer, we need to import two things. The first thing is we want to import the app state. Okay, so app state is our model where we basically store the data. So in the reducer section, let's import that thing first. As this reducer and actions are in the same directory, so if you want, you can just remove this thing, it will also work. Now let's define the reducer function. And what this reducer function will do, it will return the new state. So that will be the app state. And then this reducer function will take two things as a parameter. The first thing is it will take the previous state. Okay, we will pass previous state or current state of the application, and also we want to pass the action. The action may be dynamic because there are three types, right? Font size, bold, italic, these three types. That's why I want to use the dynamic keyword here, dynamic type, and here the action name is the action. Now what I want to do, I want to create a new state. The concept in Redux, if you use, you already know that the Redux concept is you should not mutate the existing state, rather you should create a new state every time you need a state change. So that's why I want to create a new state. But the thing is that suppose in our previous state the font size is 30. Now we want to pass the action italic. So what we should do, we should use this modified 30 state and with adding this italic state, right, by updating this thing. So that's why we need the previous state. So that's why we define this this named constructor from app state. Now let's write the if condition. So the first condition is if action is font size, then what we want to do, we want to change the state, new state dot slider font size equal action dot payload. So here you see that in our action we are passing some data, right? So we will use that data in the new state property. Let's write some other else if condition. Okay, so our reducer function implemented, finally we return the new state. So our reducers is done, our actions is done, and our app state is done. So in the main file, main.dart file, what we want to do, we need to import the Redux and Flutter Redux first. So import, and then we also want to include the app state and reducer in this file. So we implemented the necessary files in this code, and now in the main function I want to redefine this thing. I want to create the initial state of this app. So let's create the initial state. So then we have to create a store. When we initiate this store instance, we have to pass the reducer, and then we have to pass the initial state as well. So how this reducer comes in here? The reducer basically we define in our reducers.dart file. There is a reducer function. If the function name would different, we would use that different name in here. Okay, now let's call the run app, and here I will instantiate my app, but in this case I will pass the store so that each of any screen can access the store. So what I want to do, I want to store a reference of this store. So that's why I will define a new property final, and let's define a default constructor. But now I also need to do some change in here, the material app. So material app is our root app or our root widget. So if we pass the store in here, all the screen can access, right? So to do that we have to use the store provider widget from Flutter Redux. So let's do this. So here I want to type alter enter with a wrap with a new widget, and here I want to type store provider, a new widget which will take app state as the state. Okay, so store provider has a mandatory property, that is that store property. So where we want to pass this store. So our main is completed. Now come to the settings.dart file from where we want to dispatch the action. So in settings.dart file, let's import the necessary library first. So we need to import Flutter Redux, app state, and reducer in the main file as well. We do not need to use this Redux, it is basically only used in here. So come to settings and just paste the 3-line library code in here. Okay, and currently the setting space is created using the stateful widget, but we do not need that stateful widget because we are moving our state to Redux. So that's why we need to remove this setting state thing. And now what we want to do, we also do not need these three variables in here, so just remove this thing. And in the bottom side, we also do not need this in get font size because we will be using the in our app state getter function view font size to get the font size, which we can use it in here. So we no need that function in this there as well. Okay, in the body section basically we are using the state, right? So where we will connect the app state. So in the body section, in the column, click alter or option enter and wrap with a new widget where we will be using store connector widget. This is also from the Flutter Redux library. So in the main we are using store provider. Remember this concept, here we are using store provider, that means the store is providing from here, but in this screen we need to access that store. That's why we are using the store connector widget. And store connector widget, there is in the angle bracket you have to pass two things, one is the input and one is the output. So the input is the app state, we want to use this state. Also we want the output as the same, the app state. So in the angle bracket we just did it that this store connector will take app state as the input and it also use app state as the output. Okay, and now in the store connector there are two important or two mandatory property. One is the converter. So in the converter basically you have to pass a function. So this store connector, what it will do, it will pass store as the parameter of this converter function. Okay, and then you have to decide what you want to do. So in our case we just want to access the state of the store, so we will use store.state. And now come to the define the second property, that is the builder property. The store connector detect if any state change, then it will use these two converter and builder property to redefine or rebuild the widget, right? So here let's define another anonymous function. So this builder function, it will take two parameter as well. The first one is the context and the second one is the state. So this state basically coming from this converter function where we are returning this store.state, and here we need to return the widget. So I just use this column thing, let's column here. So come to here and cut this thing and remove this child from here, and here you use the return statement and then paste it here, and here instead of comma use the semicolon and save this thing. And in the here we can actually access the state. So now we can access all the things from the app state. So first we want to change this font size. So here we want to use state.viewFontSize.toInt. So view font size, you just come to here that we are defined a getter view font size. So based on slider value, it will give us a font size which we will show in here. So that's why we are using this view font size, and we need to convert it to integer value so that there is no floating point number, right? That's why we are using this .toInt. So here what we want to do on change, remove this set state method. This is basically used in the stateful widget. Let's use the store provider. This class basically coming from the Flutter Redux library. Then use the off method, and here use the angle bracket, that what kind of state you are looking for in the widget tree. So I am passing that the app state, and then in the use the context from here, and then use the dispatch method to pass the action. So here the action name will be font size, and where you will pass this new value. So this font size is it is showing that is not defined, so you need to import that is here. So we need to import the actions as well. Now it should work. Okay, so when we change the font size by this slider, we are basically using the Flutter Redux libraries store provider class, where there is a off method where we can pass the app state as the state and we will pass the context. And basically store provider of this method is looking for the app state in the widget tree. When it will find that, then it will just return, and from there we are calling this is displace method, and we are passing a new instance of the font size class as an action. So our first action is defined. Similarly, now come here, our bold, here also use the states dot bold, state dot bold, and when on change thing is happen, instead of remove set state and use same like the previous. So just copy this line and use font size, instead of font size use the bold class name, and it should work. You also use this state dot bold is here for the display purpose. When you click it, the text become bold, right? That's why you need this widget, this get style, which is defined in here, get style, where if you pass the bold as a true, then the text will be bold. So this is a common function is used in both of these widget. Similarly here, state dot italic, and on change here use the italic and pass the new value, and here is the state dot italic. So basically we do not need reducer in here, so I just remove that thing, and our settings dot dart is done. From here we are just dispatching action. So now if I run this app again, and if I come to the settings, you see if I change the font size, I can change it, and I can also use the bold or italic. And so basically this data now is stored in our app state by Redux, but I need to do some change to apply the effect in the home screen. And here we need to include two libraries, so I just copy this two library line from here and paste it in the home screen. We need the app state and the reducer. Sorry, we need the app state and Flutter Redux. Basically in this screen we are only using the one widget, rich text, so that's why I am just changing this thing and included this thing, this rich text widget within the store connector widget. So let's click the alter enter, wrap with a new widget, store connector. So similar like the settings.dart, it will take app state as input and also return app state as output. And here we need to define two function, converter, where the store connector will pass the store and it will return. We need to access the state, so we will return the store.access, and then we need to define the builder function. So I just cut this rich text thing and define the builder function. In the builder function, the store connector will pass the context and state. And here I want to I want to return the widget, and here in the font size I will use state.view font size, and there is other property I have to include, right? So here instead of color black, let's define the other property. So the font weight property. So font weight, so if the state.bold is true, then the font weight will be bold, otherwise font weight will be normal. Similarly, font style, state.click is true, then font style italic, otherwise font style will be normal. Let's save this thing. Now come to our about section, I mean about.dart file as well. So like home.dart, copy these two line, come to here and let's redefine this rich text. So our about.dart, our about screen and home screen is both done. So let's rerun this program again, and now come to settings and let's set the font size to 30, and let's come to home screen. You see the fonts become as 30. Come to the about screen, same applied in here as well. So our state is working, our dispatching is working as well. So let's make the font italic. So I tick italic and come to the home. You see the font become italic. You see about the font become italic. Let's come to the settings again and click the bold, and in this time let's redefine the font size to a little bit like 20, and come to home screen. You see it's this string is now 20 size with bold and italic style. In the about section is like same.